Ahmed Ibn Fadlan was a 10th century Arab traveler. He was born in 877. He was famous for his travels in the service of the embassy of Abbasid Khalif of Baghdad to the king of Volga Bulgars in 921.
Ibn Fadlan provided historians with detailed information about the Volga Vikings, including the eyewitness account of a Viking ship burial.
He also provided very comprehensive descriptions about other European groups as well, such as Turkic people. Volga Bulgars were united in a kingdom that existed from the 7th to the 13th century around the Volga and Kama rivers in Eastern Europe. Now it is called European Russia. Information on the Volga Bulgars from first-handed sources are rather rare, and European historians often have to make references to the ancient worlds of the Arab, Persians, and Indian travelers for more detailed knowledge about them. What is agreed upon is that the Bulgars were subjects to the Khazarian Empire. The Khazars were ruling over extended areas located between Volga-Don steppes, eastern Crimea, and North Caucasus. The Khazars and Bulgars controlled the western part of the Silk Road and flourished on trade and traffic that it brought to their region. Their blooming period ended when the Rus took over their territory in the end of the 10th century.
The Abbasid Khalif al-Muqtadar of Baghdad hired Ibn Fadlan as a messenger and sent him to the ruler of the Volga Bulgars. Al-Mish ibn Shilki had adopted Islam as a state religion, and Ibn Fadlan was sent to bring scholars and judges to the Ali state. The mission was to teach the Bulgars the culture, values, and rights of his faith and culture. The communities there were waiting for religious leaders. Scholars of law and government officials wanted to build a legal and educational system. The ruler was looking for material support and military protection to strengthen the political ties of the allies. Spreading and teaching a new way of life, however, requires to study and understand the population one is supposed to teach. Ibn Fadlan proved to be a thorough observer.
The capital of Volga Bulgars was Bulgar, a bustling trading center in Eastern Europe. The trading partners of the Bulgars included the Vikings and other tribes from the north, Chinese from the east, people from Baghdad, and Constantinople from the south, and Western European states. Historical Norwegian texts report on the Vikings' raid in Western Europe and their voyages to Iceland, Greenland, and North America. But according to European scholars, far more Viking artifacts have been found in Eastern Europe, and it is known to extensive voyages were made by the Vikings. At the Caspian Sea, they met with the Khazar and Bulgar nations. Their strength made it impossible for the Vikings to proceed with violence against them. When Ibn Fadlan first saw the Vikings, who he calls the Rus, he wrote, "I have never seen more perfect physiques than theirs. They are like palm trees, fair and reddish, and do not wear a tunic or kaftan. Each man wore a garment which covered his body on one side and left the other side free for action. Each man carried an axe and knife with him. Tattoos covered him from fingertip to neck. They drank excessively day and night." About the women, Ibn Fadlan remarked, "On their necks they wore rings of gold and silver. For each extra 10,000 dirhams their husband acquire, he purchases a necklace for her to show his wealth." The rest were pagans and worshipped idols. Ibn Fadlan observed their arrival by ships in Bulgar and wrote, "Everybody goes ashore with bread, meat, onions, milk, and wine, and then walks over to a long upright piece of wood that has a man's face on it. The Rus prostrates himself before it and says, 'O my lord, I have come from distant land, and I have brought you this gift. I wish you would send me a merchant with many dinars and dirhams, who will buy from me all that I want to sell, and who will not disagree with me over the price.'" Ibn Fadlan also calls the Rus the filthiest of God's creatures, and says that they do not wash after eating. He then describes the unhygienic way they wash their faces daily. Each morning, a slave girl arrives carrying a large basin full of water. She hands it to her master, who washes his face and hands. Then he washes his hair and combs his hair into the water. Then he goes on to clean his nose and mouth into the basin. The slave girl then passes the water to the next man, who does likewise. She goes on passing the same water basin to all the men in the house. Each one clears his nose, spits in the basin, and washes his face and hair into it. The Russer Vikings used to cremate their deads. Ibn Fadlan reports how he witnessed the funeral of a Russ. His body was put on a vessel with food, meat, and weapons. A slave girl was brought, and an old woman, who Ibn Fadlan calls the Angel of Death, sacrifices this girl by stabbing her to death, and then her body is put next to her dead master. The vessel is then set on fire and sent out into the sea, until it turned into ashes. Ibn Fadlan became a source of great historical, geographical, and ethnographic interest because he not only possessed thoroughness in observation, but he also had an inquiring mind, which led him to bring back a mass of extremely important information on the Rus. As the author of the Vikings in History, F.D. Logan mentions, no witness of the Vikings anywhere or at any stage of their history provides more detailed and vivid account than Ibn Fadlan. Its accuracy is uncontested, and its importance is obvious. The Norwegian descriptions of the Vikings' journeys were all written long after the trips ended. This undermines the validity of the text as historical source material. In Norwegian sources, the Vikings are mainly described as looting and plundering hordes and are often portrayed in a negative light. However, the findings of coins from as far as the Islamic Empire and other artifacts attested the fact that they were more than that. They were also traders, explorers, and laborers. The eyewitness accounts of their excursions to the east correct to some extent the rather bad image they have in the western part of Europe. Overall, there are very few contemporary witness accounts about the ancient Eurasian states like the Bulgars and the Khazars. Fortunately, Ibn Fadlan's observation on their culture were not only recorded by himself, but also through other historians. For example, the Arab geographer Yuqat al-Hamawi wrote a book that was entitled Mujam al-Buldan, the Dictionary of Countries, in the 12th century. The Mujam is a vast geographical encyclopedia which summarizes nearly all medieval knowledge of the globe at the time. Hamawi used Ibn Fadlan's description as a primary source. He copied these texts from the Risala, letters, written by Ibn Fadlan. The fact that Hamawi copied Ibn Fadlan as a primary source was important, because the Risala partly disappeared after that. It stayed lost for several centuries and was only recently rediscovered. Ibn Fadlan was a specialist on Islamic jurisprudence and faith. He had been serving for some time in the court of the Khalif before he was sent on his historic mission. Other than the fact he was a traveler and theologist, little is known about him. What we know is that he was the lead counselor for Islamic doctrine of the group. Ibn Fadlan explored worlds and minds that were very different from his own. He met the Muslim Bulgars who needed his advice and expertise. He met Eurasia's Turkic people, and he took a close look at the culture that couldn't be more strange to him, the one of the Scandinavian Vikings. Ibn Fadlan documented diligently and in great detail all his observations. Most of his writings have survived or have been rediscovered and have been used by scholars and historians to document a part of history that was largely left blank. He not only enriched those he was sent to teach, but also his own people by bringing back the reports of his travels. He also keeps enriching our contemporary knowledge of the Turkic and Scandinavian Vikings. Modern Western scholars could not easily access and study the region's history because of its political situation that had lasted for decades. It is now ready to be rediscovered with the help of Ibn Fadlan's text and the point of view from the 21st century. The traveler about whom we know so little turned once more into an important source of knowledge and information long time after the end of his voyages.